My name is Dennis Gann, the director of the Northern Plains Ethics Institute at NDSU. We are one of the organizers of this event. We also want to thank our other sponsors. We're sponsored by the NDSU's College of Arts and Sciences, Tri-College University, Humanities North Dakota, the Dakota Digital Academy, my Northern Plains Ethics Institute, and the Crosswinds Institute. I have a great deal of pleasure introducing my colleague and friend, Thomas Creely from the Naval War College, to talk about AI and challenges in technology. Creely is creator and director of the Ethics and Emerging Military Technology Graduate Certificate Program at the U.S. Naval War College, which conducts research on ethics of emerging disruptive technologies contributing to policy. He has collaborated with Five Eyes, the Technical Corporation Project, ELSEI, Special Competitive Studies Project, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DoD, Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office, Defense Innovation Board, Cyber Solarium 2.0, and IEEE, Study for Social Implications of Technology. He also serves as a subject matter expert in women, peace, and security, and serves on the WPS General Committee and Faculty Advisory Council. By the way, this is just part of it. So they keep adding things to him, doing things with NATO. He's doing things with a lot of different organizations around the world who are now trying to figure this out, including a congressional committee with a bunch of senators too.
Yeah, emerging biotech.
The Emerging Biotechnology Committee. So he can answer just about any questions, or if he can't, he can take it really well. But anyways, let's welcome our speaker.
Thank you very much, Dr. Creely. I appreciate the opportunity of being here. I first must have a disclaimer that says what I say here is my opinion and not the policy of the Department of Defense, even though we do have an official program of the Ethics and Military Technology Graduate Certificate Program. Ethics of technology has become critically important, particularly since COVID. I created the program 8 years ago, and we're graduating our 8th class. When I started it, my boss, who was a retired two-star, said, "This is the stupidest thing we ever heard of." But fortunately, my provost supported it and said, "Keep going for it, keep pushing for it." He also co-taught with me at that time. But the dynamic changed over the last 3 to 4 years. So what is technology to you? I've asked this question to some of the students. We had some great discussion earlier. What is technology to you? Anyone? Need a microphone? Okay, thanks. If I can't walk too far with it. What is technology to you?
That's created that's useful for society.
Okay. Created for the benefit of society. Okay. Yes. All right. Product innovation. All right. That's part of it as well. I have a question for you. Get to the title here. Ethical dilemmas we face in a rapidly changing landscape, humanity plus technology. So what does it mean to be human in an age of technology? Any thoughts about that? Does technology control you, or do you control the technology? Let me provoke your thinking a little bit further. This is a mural I'm going to put up here. It's at the University of Torino, Italy, in their College of Technology. And it's The Thinker, 2-story mural. The Thinker is bent over, holding a power cord. What does that say, the image? Pardon? Well, that's one answer. He pulled the plug. Anyone else? Okay. What other thoughts?
So they can hear them.
Okay. What is to be human in age of technology? Could you speak a little bit louder?
Humans build technology so they can turn it off whenever they want.
Okay. Humans can control the technology and they can turn it off whenever they would like.
I think was part of Rodin's Gates of Hell. And it could either be that or it can be used for good.
Sure. In fact, technology has dual purpose, good and evil. You're absolutely right. So how many technophobes do we have here? Any technophobes? Fear of technology? Anyone have a phone or a pad? How many have the disease of technophilia? The love of technology. We love it, we embrace it, and we use it without even questioning the ethical implications of technology. You do so much today.
I mean, you don't really think about it, you use technology, like, a lot of people just hop on their phone without thinking about it, or go online on their
Yeah.
laptop.
Because it makes us feel good. It gives us a sense of power. And to have technology and have that power in our hand. So as I said, technology is good and evil, dual purpose, and evil is the privation of the good. The EMT program is quite unique. It's the only one of its kind in the Department of Defense. We do specialized research on the threats to national security related to technology, and to look at the deeper levels of the ethical implications. We say this is mind-bending work that we are doing today. We are in a war of minds. We have to be able to outthink our adversaries. So we look at ethics. How do we bring ethics and technology together? Ethics does not just do the right thing, because we have to question whose thing and whose ethics are we following. But we have to learn to look at ethics through the lens of deontology, duty, utilitarianism, consequentialism, virtue, that is human flourishing, our character, and then also justice and rights. And look at the technologies through those lenses as we compete with other nations, states, as well as independent actors as well. So here's some definition of tech ethics. A conscious reflection of moral beliefs, but proving and extending those beliefs in some way, by Lawrence Hinman. As every philosopher has a right to do, is to write your own definition of ethics. So what we have in ethics is competing value. We have the competing values of deontology, utilitarian virtues, rights, and justice. When those come against one another, we have the dilemmas that we have to work through. And we have to use ethical frameworks to be able to make good decisions, the best decisions possible. We have to look at the second and third order effects of a particular technology or a particular dilemma that we're dealing with. And what is technology? Here are two definitions. It's Jacques Ellul, the totality of methods rationally arrived at and having absolute efficiency for a given stage of development field of human activity. These are broad definitions. And then Larry Hickman's is the sum of concrete activities and products of men and women who engage in inquiry in its manifold forms, the sciences and fine arts and useful arts and business. When we first started the Ethics and Emerging Military Technology program, we asked the question, what is technology to you? And all the students picked up their phones and their pads. That was what technology was for them at that time. About 3 weeks later, it changed. Because what we presented them with, the risks and vulnerabilities, as well as the opportunities, they went to say, oh my gosh, my head's about to explode. I laid awake all night thinking about the description you gave about biotechnology. Or I thought about it the whole weekend long. So this is a new discipline, ethics of technology, and it came out of World War II as far as the academic literature and the thinking about it from the military industrial complex. And there are not many of us in this field, and we need a whole lot more people in this field as well with the emerging disruptive technologies. Technology is liberation. Technology is threat, and technology is power. Those are three concepts that you need to keep in mind as you use a piece of technology. It's liberation, it's threat, and it's power. How do we get control of that equation between ethics and technology? Well, we have to begin to think about future. Future studies is really important. As part of the special competitive studies on the defense panel, we think of what is going to happen between now and 2030. We have this point in time on this graph, our history, our knowledge as of this moment. And typically we can kind of look at the patterns and trends and methods, relationships, the buzzwords that we like to use to describe things. A few years ago, we had a war game, cyber war game. We had the last fire chief of 9/11 come and to participate in that. In addition to him, we had C-level people from various industries of transportation, of the airlines, railroads, law enforcement, medical, and on it goes to participate. And there's some startling realities that came out of that war game, that we were at a disadvantage. The fire chief got up at the end of it. He said, you know our problem? We don't have an imagination that we need to engage and encounter adversaries. We could not imagine people who would come against us in 9/11. We have to develop an imagination and expand our aperture to look at the black swans, and the outliers, and the disruptive, because that is where our adversaries are operating. We're very comfortable. We have very little threat, except for maybe the southern border that has a lot of people coming across us, various initiatives and purposes. We have to begin to think the way our adversaries think and look through our lens. One of my recent students who just left the War College couple of weeks ago was the senior naval attaché in Hong Kong. And he wrote a paper on Confucianism and biotechnology. And he looked at it through the lens of the Chinese. He even reached back to his CCP, Chinese Communist Party contacts, in his intelligence work in order to write the paper. And it's now our reading for our students who were selected for the EEMT program. So we have to change the paradigm and the lenses through which we look at our adversaries and recognize where they're coming from. Because we're in two different worlds as we look at the global situation. We're in a battle for values as well. China, Russia, and Iran see themselves morally superior to the United States. They feel that an autocracy is better than a democracy because they can keep you from making mistakes, from sinning, or whatever that may be. Where we rely upon freedom of thought, moral autonomy in making decisions. But we also want people to be accountable and responsible for making those decisions. So where do most people get their values this day? Where do they learn ethics? Pardon? Family? That would be nice. It used to be the family. Pardon?
Online.
Online, absolutely. Most people learn their values and their ethics from online. And that's the reason with TikTok. Yes, sir. Speak up loud. In the classroom, Professor
Yeah.
Creely teaching you values and ethics. Great. So you can see the impact and the power of the platform TikTok and other social media that is having. We were talking earlier in the afternoon discussion with two students about the power of social media and how it influences young men and women and ways of thinking. In fact, ISIS and Hezbollah and other terrorist groups are masters at propaganda because they use the graphics, they use the verbiage that resonates with them. And like all religions, there are elements of truth in all religions. So therefore, they use truth, but they also twist it in order to get sympathy or empathy from people in order to win hearts and minds. So see how ethics is becoming more important as we deal with technology. Here are the topics that we look at in all the subcategories that our students research. Our students are so competitively selected. They have to have good writing skills. They also have to have a passion for ethics of technology and have thought about some of the risk and abilities that technology presents to us. So we're going to look at 4 of these this evening. Artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence for the military is a decision assist. We don't rely upon it totally, but it gives us the information in quite rapid time of which to make decisions. The DoD principles of ethics say that the human will always be in the loop and to make those decisions. Now, we also have some ethics that will be challenged down the road when we start with autonomous technology and giving it that decision-making part. But we think that's a few years down the road. Anyone know what Ukraine did just as the war was to begin with Russia? They uploaded all their data to the cloud so the Russians could not get to it. When the Russians went into Ukraine and stole the tractors, the John Deere tractors, and started moving them back to Russia, what happened? Up in the state of Washington, John Deere hit a button and killed every one of those tractors in the field. The Russians had to walk home after that. That's the power of technology, the power of artificial intelligence and conflict. Most people think that the conflict is about, bombs and missiles, which it is. But what we are experiencing is these disruptive technologies operating at a low level that are being used to break the will of the American society and the moral will of our society. AI has values because it is written by a human being, and a human, those algorithms, their values are encoded into that. There has to be constant testing and evaluation in order to overcome biases. And also, we don't really know what's in the black box at times that makes decisions for us. So we have to stay on top of that as we use AI. Medical technology. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the technology in medicine at all. A recent article this week, they're able now to do brain scans to look at how abused children can find a way back to normalcy in their lives, or children who have gone through traumatic experiences. A new discovery that has come out as last week. ChatGPT. We had started out a year ago in the fall, and we're up to ChatGPT 4. How about auto safety? My wife says, I don't want you to ever drive another car without all the bells and whistles of auto safety. Is that a good thing? Absolutely it is. But at the same time, everything you do in the car is being recorded. It's being recorded. Anybody here own a General Motors car? A new GM car? They're taking the information about how you drive and they're selling it to insurance companies who are raising your rates. That's a recent revelation. So technology can be absolutely wonderful, but it also can bite back in that sense. Kind of hard to see up here, very little lighting. 1 second. The point of AI is the Horizon program in the United Kingdom. That the Horizon program was designed through Fujitsu. It was revealed earlier this year that over 700 masters in the United Kingdom were convicted of felony fraud. Many lost their homes, lost their savings, lost their retirement, went to prison, and so far 4 have committed suicide, over 700 postmasters. Why? Because the investigators believed only the algorithms, that was the truth, regardless of the evidence that was presented for their defense. Prime Minister Sunak right now is trying to figure out, first of all, how do we vacate these felony convictions of over 700 people? How do we compensate the families, especially those who committed suicide because they were convicted of felony? So it brings me to the point of Yuval Harari. One had read Sapiens, book Sapiens. How about Homo Deus, man to God, which was written 3 years ago, and it's a required reading in our program. In Homo Deus, he says that there is a new religion. And that new religion is dataism. Dataism. You will be known only by the data you create. You'll be known only by the digital footprint that you leave. And you as an individual, as a soul person, will no longer exist. That was about 3 years ago. He wrote the book. I said, well, gosh, that's got to be, way down the road. And yet, over 700 people were convicted of felony because they believed the algorithms were absolutely correct. Yes, ma'am.
Would you repeat the name of that book?
Yeah, Homo Deus, Homodeus. Yuval Noah Harari, he's a strategist for the Israeli government and a professor in Israel. Yeah, it's quite enlightening. It's called Homo Deus, A History of the Future. Yep. Also, Matthias Desmet, professor in Belgium, wrote a book called The Psychology of Totalitarianism, which he quotes Yuval Noah Harari. And his is that we are moving to a digital totalitarianism. As a result of COVID-19, the tracing and the surveillance that was done, that there is a mass collection of information on people. And that also coincides with Shoshana Zuboff's book on surveillance capitalism. How many of you have talked about buying a product and you go over and pick up your pad or your phone and there's an advertisement on your pad or phone? That happened to my wife and I a few months ago at breakfast. We both had ads about the product that we were discussing. Invasive of our privacy. Note here. Anyway, I can't read that, but we can move on to some other things. Any of you have examples of artificial intelligence? We look at our adversaries, and that is one of the areas in which we are looking to how do we outpace our adversaries, because they are making tremendous strides in artificial intelligence, in blockchain technology. The United States, a few years ago, Eric Schmidt tells the story, had the brightest person on blockchain technology. He was a graduate of MIT. And the United States government, the department refused to give him a visa to stay here, go to work for the Department of Defense or any of the contractors. We're here today. This blockchain wizard. He's the chief architect of China's blockchain program. So, and we are behind in the area of blockchain technology. Biotechnology. We'll look at synthetic biotechnology, Cas9 CRISPR gene technology. Do we have anyone a biologist here majoring in biology? What are some of the risks that might be with biotechnology that we face? Well, the good thing is it produces a lot of good health issues, cures cancer, and helps to develop food, genetic manipulation and producing food. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't there a possibility that would be to eradicate humans from illness? People won't have immunity to illness anymore?
Well, that would be a great thing, and that's what they're looking at, trying to eradicate illnesses in humans. But you can also take the same engineering and create a genetic weapon as well. It can be designed for particular groups of people. The Chinese are trying to collect every bit of DNA that they can from Americans. Even that they have established companies that they can collect the placenta from births at hospitals. What are they doing with it? We don't really know. But that is one of their missions in that respect. Human enhancement. We talk about human enhancement. DARPA working on programs to enhance the warfighter. We do research that has helped the injured warfighter through physical therapy and through technology with brain implants. Neuralink put an implant into a quadriplegic as part of their research. And the individual is doing quite well with that implant. He's able to communicate via the computer through his brain and the implant. Those are wonderful things. But at the same time, how many of you have wearables? Tracking your heart rate, how many steps you take, etc. The wearables are great intelligence for adversaries. And they collect information as well. It tells exactly what's going on in our bodies. And so this becomes valuable to them. Food. We have to have genetically modified organisms in order to feed the world. Otherwise, half the population would starve. During the COVID-19, we had millions of gallons of dairy being poured down the drains. We had millions of acres of produce being plowed under, and pigs, cattle, and chickens being euthanized because farmers could not move it. Yet at the same time, we had people standing in line for food. People don't recognize that the food supply of this country was crackling under the weight of COVID-19. Watching all the food being plowed under, milk and dairy being poured down the drain, I called my friend, Dr. Molly John, who's a biotechnologist and the world food expert, and asked her, I said, what can we do about this? She said, call everyone you know. And so we started making calls to people. So we called the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, sent them an email. We sent IBM, who had the chairman at the time, an email. NASA, Defense Logistics, the Park City Group, who had a repertoire of around 30,000 businesses that they collected on food, and we went to work. But what we did was that we took CARES dollars, paid farmers at cost. Defense Logistics moved the food to the food banks so that we were able to feed people rather than it being wasted. And the project was called Food Source USA. It's now in mothballs. After the COVID was over, pretty much, it was given to 19 PhD students, rework it, revamp it, because we put it together very quickly. And it is ready for the next crisis and the next pandemic, which will eventually. Ethics is an action word. And what did we do? We leveraged the artificial intelligence. We leveraged the biotechnology as well in order to overcome this crisis that we're experiencing in our country. And it was just reported in the Street Journal that actually it's the Times of London reported it. North Korea now has bioweapons. This came out 2 weeks ago. And we think that there will probably be some type of genetic disease or created bioweapon that will be released at some point in time. So it's important to think about these things. You as students that are here and academics that are here, we have to begin to think ways in which we can combat these threats to us in our country, in our population. Neurotechnology. Neurotechnology is a tool of empowerment or it's a tool of control. Because we now have what we call brain hacking into your brain. Have any of you read anything about brain hacking? Yeah.
Hasn't it been used to kind of leverage people, blackmail / get money out of them as a threat, or they'll mess up head, so to speak.
That's actually into the cognitive warfare that I'll talk about shortly. It's part of the information part, but it does go with the neurotechnology. How many of you have heard of the Havana syndrome? Yeah, the Havana syndrome. I had my interns to research that. I could not find anything anywhere about it. And just recently, there's been some reports that have come out that said, yes, these State Department, CIA, and other government officials in these different countries, Cuba, China, Vietnam, and others, did experience some kind of problem neurologically. And so there's a whole, I guess you could say, where is truth in this and where is conspiracy? We don't know because there's not much revealed. But there seems to be that microwaves were used to target individuals. But neurotechnology also takes place with all the information collected about you as well. How do they tap into your brain? There's a book out called The Battle for Your Brain. Again, this goes back to everything that you type on a keyboard is recorded. A psychological profile can be developed from how you type on the keys. So how much information or how much influence and power do adversaries have? In fact, when we talk about nudging, there's a new artificial intelligence program that's being worked on. It's called nudging. How do we nudge people to the behavior we want them to have? A positive behavior. What can go wrong with that? Are there any ethical implications to nudging people's behavior through artificial intelligence and neurotechnology? There's nothing in our Constitution that protects our brains. And interestingly, just this week, I got a mail from a colleague of mine who's now at the Center for Digital and Artificial Intelligence Center actually this afternoon, where the governor of Colorado just signed a bill, the first law in the United States to protect our brains. So if you live in Colorado, your brain is protected. The only country that has neurotechnology in a law is in the Constitution of the government of Chile. They have the most advanced neurotechnology protection, neuro rights in the world. Rafael Yuste at Columbia University runs the Neuro Rights Institute and promotes the protection. And he's working with the White House in developing some laws that will protect our brains from being hacked. Information technology, social media. What is truth today? Thing we see on the internet, it's got to be true. The objective in social media is to convince people that what you put out, the propaganda that you put out is truth. And find a way that people believe it. We are not deep thinkers any longer as a society. We're not as critical as we should be. We said most people get their values on the internet, they get their news from the internet. So what about the power of the information technology in your lives? Platforms. How many different social media groups are you part of? And this goes back to TikTok because they collect the information that you put online. Even what is innocuous to you and to me is important to them. Taking a photograph with a group of people together, they're not interested in the people that are standing there so much as they're interested in what they can see behind the individuals, what intelligence that they could get, for instance, off the bookshelves or the area that is open to them. Right now, the Russians are sowing propaganda in Europe in order to manipulate the elections that are coming up this year, in order to diminish the support for Ukraine and increase the power of Russia. Just the last few days, the United States has been kicked out of Niger, or Niger, rather, have been kicked out of there, which we had a great relationship with them. Russians came in, put out a tremendous amount of profit. Are you familiar with the Belt and Road Project? The Belt and Road Project is run by the Chinese. They go into different countries and help build the infrastructure. They get a small country, for instance, like Sri Lanka, in debt because they built them a very nice port. Sri Lanka defaulted on the loan, and so now the Chinese own the port in Sri Lanka, having a tremendous power of a seaport in that area of the world. One of our students 2 years ago was from South Africa, and he told me, he said, Dr. Creely, if America fails, all of Africa fails. Because the Chinese have gone in and built embassies, new embassies there. They have gotten mineral rights and metal rights for the metals that are needed for industry, for computers, and for weapons, and for building most anything. Because they want a dominance of the resources that are available. Think about it, they have 1.5 billion people, and India has 1.5 billion people, and India is going to eat China in population in the near future. And we have a limited earth, limited resources. Even they're here trying to buy up all the farmland of the United States. And if I'm correct, I believe that the Chinese tried to buy farmland here in North Dakota near Minot. Is that correct? Okay. So dominance is what is important. And so we're in a peer competition with the other governments for resources and for minds and for hearts. So how do we respond to these threats, these vulnerabilities? What are some ways that we can respond to it? Because the future depends on you as young men and women doing the hard, mind-bending work and coming up with solutions. My colleague and I walk into our cohort and we say, we don't have any answers, but you have the answers because you're the ones that are going to have to grapple with our questions. What are some ways that you think that you can make a difference? Because this is something that you have to begin to think about. And you have a role to play. And one of us this afternoon said, well, I'm looking to go to be an engineer with the Ford Motor Company. So how would I have a role in that? In part of the national security defense? I said, well, I was at a Wall Street Journal artificial intelligence seminar, and there was a group of lawyers that presented on law, technology, and ethics. At the end of their presentation, I asked them and said, You know, you talked about law, you talked about technology, but I didn't hear one thing about ethics. And they said, well, we really don't care about the ethics. That's not a part of what we do. We're only concerned with the liability. So that engineering student has a responsibility to look at what to do, even at Ford Motor Company. Is it right for Ford Motor Company to collect all the info and sell it to make a profit? And how much being done? Oh gosh, I think I read an article last night where NVIDIA chips are now in the hands of our Chinese adversaries because we sold them to legitimate people who turned around and sold them or gave them to the Chinese. So there should be a greater awareness of these threats and vulnerabilities. Some people say, are you an alarmist? No, I'm not an alarmist, but I am concerned because of what we see and what is happening. So what are some ways that you think would be beneficial to our society? How about digital literacy? Having the educated. Not only in the universities, but in professions and also in elementary, high schools, and middle schools. We have to have greater public awareness of the risk and the vulnerabilities. We can't just continue to be in love with the technology and not have some sense of responsibility. We also need to push back against big tech and hold them accountable and let them know that we need moral accountability. Tristan Harris, who was the ethics officer for Google, left there because he recognized the fact that social media was addictive. It was designed to be addictive and to keep people on it, to keep them scrolling. Yep, I scroll as well. I like arts. I go through all sorts of sculptures and paintings and things. And then how much time I wasted going through all this art? But that is the purpose of it, is to keep us there. So we have to learn to put the black mirror down, as it's often referred to, and be able to think the ways in which we can help mitigate the impact and the power of technology, as well as finding new uses for the betterment of humanity. Here are some of the titles of research papers that we have produced at the EMT program. Deepfakes, the Army JAG also wrote the top one. Should we use deepfakes against our adversaries? And his point was no, that we should not. That we should maintain the moral bar if we expect our adversaries to raise the moral bar, become our standard. Ethical targeting. It's really important. And that was part of the whole issue with Project Maven. Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious if these papers are public.
Yes, they are public domain. We have a deep the Defense Technical Information Center. That you could get these and read them. Weapons, weaponization of space is really important. I have two students right now who are writing on space ethics and the weaponization. That's really important. You can't navigate ships if you don't have satellites. If you don't have GPS, how are you going to find your way home tonight? In fact, the Naval Academy has returned to teaching celestial navigation with a sextant because they recognize that no one knew how to do it of the Naval Academy graduates. With the threat increasing in space warfare, they had to start teaching the ancient technology with the sextant. Military medicine. We had one of the students that came up with the idea of the concept of developing a robot that could go in a fire zone and take a wounded warrior, be able to administer treatment to that wounded warrior. And at a certain point, when it's safe to bring that warrior out, that the robot would retrieve that warrior and bring the warrior out of the fire zone and saving that warrior's life. He sent me a text. He and my colleague, Don Masakowski, who is working with CDAO, the Center for Digital Artificial Intelligence, the day I arrived here, that Army Medicine has bought his concept and are now exploring putting it into action. So there are a lot of great ideas and concepts, young men and women who are thinking of the second and third order effects. They are visionizing and having a futurizing experience of thinking ahead of our adversaries. As I said, we're in a battle of brains in the hard mind-bending work. Here are some of our partners. We work with DARPA, produced the National Security Commission final report to Congress on artificial intelligence. That's what gave out the OD 5 principles of ethics and recommendations. Cyber Solarium, NATO, I'm working with them right now. They want to establish a workshop. I made a proposal about a month ago and they accepted it last week. An ethical, legal, and social and environmental workshop with NATO countries, moving with that. And other groups, Special Competitive Studies Project, which I mentioned, they're having the Ash Carter AI Expo on the 7th and 8th May. I'll be attending that. I sit on the defense panel. And then the Chief Digital Artificial Intelligence Office is working with them on some of the research. They're mentoring our students. And then the Technical Cooperation Program, which is part of the Five Eyes. Five Eyes is Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom. And so it comes the Five Eyes, Science and Technology, the Technical Cooperation Program, Ethical, Legal, Social, and Environmental Issues Action Group. And I'm there of that group, which we provide the education and research for the technologies, for instance, of electronic warfare, biotechnology, artificial intelligence, human factors, and how it affects humanity. And so the whole concept of ELSI, even DARPA has their own program that I help them with in setting up a visiting scholars program for ethical, legal, social, and environmental research in the projects that they're doing at DARPA. And Canada wants their own program as well. So ethics of technology is expanding. There's plenty of room for people in the discipline of ethics and technology to have work to do and to think about these. The question, are you ready for the mind-bending challenges, ethical challenges in technology? Yeah, any questions that you may have? Any comments?
Thank you. I think so.
Okay.
Let's thank our speaker and go with questions.
With the increased interest in space and the advancement of autonomous systems, do you think that there will be increased effort to colonize space, or has it been generally decided that it is?
To colonize space?
Yes.
Well, that's way in the future. Yeah, I guess the thing is, I haven't seen a whole lot of discussion about colonizing space. Right now, we're looking, how do we defend our satellites? How do we keep them from being blown out of space? In fact, it was just this past week, there was a piece of satellite, if you watch the news, it fell through the roof of the house, through the second floor and down to the first floor. There's a lot of space junk up there. Go to Martin Marietta in Alexandria, and they have a computer screen up there, and you can see all the space junk. I think you can pull it up on the internet as well. That's floating around out there. And so that presents a threat, as well as some nation targeting our satellites and bringing them down. So I think it's more futuristic as far as colonizing. We have bigger problems than worrying about colonizing, even though other countries, China and Russia, say they want to be there first, to be on Mars and set up something. But that's way out there and a ton of money. Well, yes, ma'am.
What efforts have been made to clear up space junk? And if no efforts have been made, why?
But it's hard to clean up space junk. It's an impossibility. And part of it's our own fault, because we did not set any international laws when we started sending things out. At that time, we were the only people sending, and then the Russians, and then the Chinese joined in, the French, the English, and on it goes. So satellites just don't come down when they become useless. They still float around and they crash into each other, create more junk up there. So it's really a junkyard in that sense. So we're at the risk of the junk floating around, as well as the risk of an adversary taking our satellites down. Any other questions or thoughts you may have? Yes, sir.
Do you think something such as the TikTok ban impedes on personal freedoms in the US, or is it necessary?
Will TikTok ban increase our personal freedoms? Well, you still have the freedom to get on to the internet. You still have the freedom to get on other platforms to make those decisions. You still have the freedom to post onto those. But what do you want to post? What do you want other people to know about you or use against you? I don't think it's going to affect the freedom. You just won't have the freedom of TikTok, because their collection of the information is for their nefarious purposes. And they wouldn't be taking this strong measure. They're probably classify things we don't know to pass a law to ban it if there was not extremely serious concern, given how much we put faith into our freedoms and our rights in this country.
Do you think it sets a bad precedent going forward, just get up banning an entire platform?
Well, that's part of the political debate and the ideological debate. And one of the other things that's important with social media, you have Black Lives Matter, you have Antifa, you have Proud Boys, and all these groups fighting with one another here in the United States, right? You also have the Chinese, the Russians, the North Koreans, and the Iranians mimicking those groups and pitting them against one another. So it becomes multiplying the dissension with the ideological groups, and they're very good at it. So what is truth? Is it the truth the Chinese put out, or is it truth we see on our own platforms? You know, I'm a believer in free speech, no matter how offensive it sounds. But when we start controlling free speech in our country, I think you're right. We're going to have a slippery slope there. You know, whose speech, like whose ethics, are we going to pay attention to? But how much power does that free speech have if your adversaries are taking advantage of the platforms to influence minds and hearts? So this is a conundrum, a moral, ethical conundrum. And with our libertarian, well, not libertarian, but our free spirit here in the United States, then they can use that against us, because they absolutely control their people in those countries. In fact, they just recently have tightened control in China and in Russia on their own people through technology, surveillance. Any other thoughts or questions you may have? Yes, sir. Speak up.
So, so what is your thoughts of people having to upload personal information like their driver's license or something to have a social media platform?
Yeah. You shouldn't put things like that on social media. In fact, Nita Farahaney, who wrote, just came out this last year, The Battle for Your Brain, pointed out there was research that was done. And one of the things they asked, which do you value more, your thoughts or your social security number? What do you think people value more? You know what she's thinking about you? Can you read your thoughts? Well, the research proves that people value their social security number more than their thoughts about other people. Now, that would work for me in driving in Newport because my thoughts, people on the island, they just kind of fade off the road. But we all have thoughts about people. We have thoughts about things. We all have various thoughts. But when we're not willing to protect our thoughts, then we're much more vulnerable to being led in a whole different direction. Does that answer your question? Any other thoughts or questions you may have? Yes, ma'am. And then-
Thank you for the work you do.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you say that you could end on a positive note? And what can you send us out with that's positive about these challenges?
We have young, bright men and women who are doing some hard thinking to come up with a solution because these papers help inform national security policy to these agencies that I listed up there. That's the positive thing. And they are quite inspiring. They make my head spin. They make my head pound because of the things that they come up with would have never come up with. They're a whole lot smarter than me. And I hope, pray to God that they are. Because it is going to take the effort of this mind-bending work of these young men and women thinking through these critical issues. And that's the positive about it. That's what keeps me going and being inspired and to push against those who are against this program. Because they so, we have people still live in Plato's cave. And they still fight the war, conventional war. But what we're seeing is an increase in these disruptive emerging technologies that are being aimed against us by these different countries simultaneously. It's not we're going to watch AI. We hear a lot about AI right now. And then tomorrow, next week, we'll look at IO. And then neuro. No, they're all coming at us at the time. This gentleman? Yes.
I had a thought about just kind of expanding on the point you had about the engineer who worked at the company, but more in like application military. How does like ethics apply to like a lower level user of technology? Is like ethics consideration more for your superior officers and commanders?
Absolutely not. And that's a very good point because how do we develop the technology ethically? How do we use it ethically? And then again, said how we respond ethically to our adversaries. And it's important that the operator, whether it be the corporal, sergeant, the lowest level, or the seaman, has to learn to use the technology ethically. The education has to be pervasive across all of the military. In fact, the National Security Report on Artificial Intelligence requires to be taught in all the service academies and at the war colleges, and it all been implemented in Navy education and training as well. And it has to be combined. Yes, ma'am.
So, I'm sorry, you had a question?
Go ahead.
Okay, I see a number of intersections in what you talked about, related to business. So a couple of things that you talked about is, looking to second, third, fourth consequences. I think the things that we have in, the current capitalistic structure is short-term thinking. And I think the illustration that you gave was pandemic, when animals and, produce was garbage instead of thinking to the second and third consequence of all of that. There was a lot of preparedness, thoughtfulness on individuals and corporation part, because they were only thinking about the next week, the next month,
Yeah.
instead of thinking broadly. And I think part of what I struggle with, and what I try to do with my students at Concordia, is I try to get them to think in terms of second, third, fourth consequence, because that's part of the ethical consideration. However, the odds are stacked against them because our current capitalistic structure is so short-term thinking. We have Wall Street analysts who only look at this quarter's results, which is where Ford Motor Company makes stupid ass decisions that they started making back in the 70s when they made the Pinto. I mean, clearly they haven't improved in their decision-making process. I mean, those are some of the things that I think we have to think about, and that's, as you've been talking about AI and other things, it's like first, second, third, fourth consequences. And I think some of the solutions that we might look to actually can come from our native neighbors who talk in terms of looking back the 7 generations and looking forward the 7 generations. Because unless we start doing more sustainable thinking, we will always have, I mean, it's like the movie, that Broderick was in, where it was about a war machine, and it basically decided, oh, this is craziness. We have a bunch of folks who are crazy because they think somehow that the last person standing on a blown up world is the winner when we've all losers. So I think it's long-term thinking based.
Well, Putin said that whoever wins an AI conquers the world. Rates there. But, we cannot predict everything that's going to happen. We can't see every second, third, and fourth order effect. And not all ethical dilemmas are soluble, because we're in uncharted territory. And until we go through an experience dealing with the technology, with its ethical implications, we don't know what decision that we can make. And we may have to make a decision that is an unethical decision in order to get to a higher ethical bar, but that has to be thought through very carefully. And that is the I'm trying to think of the word for it. When you have to make a bad decision in order to get to higher. We talked about it earlier.
You can't remember, I had to answer that, but it's such that, that's all.
Yeah, you're relying on the number. Yeah. So, but it's basically emergent decision making that you only make out of the last resort.
One
In
could
order
say
to do that.
the atomic bomb, that was what was behind the first atomic bomb, dropping the first.
Yeah.
Looking at that horrific decision as it was an immoral decision, and they looked at the second level consequences to that. I think, yes, I also think it's time for the men to get out of the driver's seat and let some more women into it, because all these male leaders
Yeah.
are
That brings
trying
up
to
a
be crazy
very
because
good point.
they are send people into
Yeah.
children into war
Yeah.
as if there are no ongoing consequences. And I that's okay. I'm biased, gentlemen.
Well, that's a very good point, because one of the solutions to this is having a multidisciplinary approach that involves people of different disciplines and backgrounds and different cultures coming together to solve this global problem that we have. So you need scientists, psychologists, philosophers, as well as the scientists and the technologists and the engineers, and a part of that. Yes, Patrick.
I want to ask about, a lot of talking about in West keeping for higher ground, respect for individuals, which we will try to do. What the ethical limit in the military is that, for example, you mentioned is on the loose decision making on weapons, but which we do at this point. these weapons are programmed not only by each other, but to make decisions. And so seems that we're, our enemies don't respect people hiding. Like, we try to maintain it. We must always be mindful and put it in.
Well, the CNO just ordered swarms, thousands of swarms of drones to be made to develop swarming, which is in this conflict with drones. In fact, we make first drones, of small drones, of anybody. The Turkish make great drones, the Russians make great drones, the Israelis make great drones, but our smaller drones are not that good at all. They run out of power, right? Because they try to make them all electric. Now it's like, well, let's make our tactical vehicles electric. That's what we're going to do. Time out in the midst of a war, we got to charge our tanks. That's not going to work. They're serious, and I got to take time out with this. So, we're moving towards more of an autonomous warfare. There's no doubt about it. But the technology is not there. It's like having an electric vehicle, but we don't have a battery that will sustain the cold weather or the hot weather. So a bit ahead of the cart in that respect. But that was just announced just 2 or 3 months ago of having drones, and they're putting the drones on carriers. In fact, you will no longer eventually have the F-18 fighter pilots. And I worked with them when I was in Buford with the Marines. Everything would be via drones and autonomous type of weapons. Yes, sir.
So I think it was around 2011 sort of banned people from getting the black box that's in your car. So if you have an accident, the insurance companies, law enforcement, none of them could have access to it. You own that. And they could not take that. Good. Are there other measures that are being taken by states or nations? Because this is, what are we going to do? Go over to arrest people and put them in jail somewhere? What hammer do we have for these cases?
Well,
That's effective in any way.
yeah. I mean, fortunately, we're in a mode of appeasement at this point in time, and the oligarchs can get around the sanctions that are there through various means and through people in the Middle East that help them to get around those sanctions. We're not putting the screws to our adversaries to let them know who is in charge. Another point I'd like to make is the fact that one of the Air Force major wrote a fantastic paper on law enforcement in the United States and AI. The Chinese stole all of our information at the Office of Personnel Management when everybody had a security clearance from secret all the way up to top secret CI. But at this point, I trust the Chinese, my information, more than I do American law enforcement, because American law enforcement is one of the largest consumers of personal information. Give you an example. I went to pick my wife up. We'd had knee replacement surgery. On my way there in Smyrna, it was raining. Tropical storm was coming through, just a light rain. Mail truck on the outside lane delivering mail, vehicle behind it. Then I moved to the inside lane and allowed the vehicle that was in front of me to come over too. And they went on, and I speed up, and a city of Smyrna truck hit me in the rear end. Smyrna cops come to investigate, and we have a discussion. He said, "You should have been watching the traffic behind you." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, that's your responsibility. Watch the traffic behind you." I said, "No, I was trying to prevent an accident from happening." Well, that's your responsibility. You're just holding up traffic, impeding the traffic. So I never told him who I was. I was 2 years ago, I was 68. And so I said, well, he said, in a short, stocky guy, and he kept getting closer to me. And what he wanted me to do was to say something or do something and arrest me. And he says, "I don't think you like what I have to say." I said, it's not a matter of whether I like what you have to say or not, but it's a matter of ethics. And I've never heard of anyone being rear-ended by another vehicle who is charged with not watching out for the person behind them. Where you were impeding traffic. So what it is, he said, well, your insurance can pay for it. So he wanted to call the town police, let investigate, but my wife's been there since 5 o'clock in the morning for the knee surgery, et cetera. So I said, hey, I can't stay. I gotta go pick her up. So he knew he had me to find. So I went and picked her up, got her back, got her stuff, called the insurance company. They said, send the photos. I sent the photos. They were livid. Absolutely, this is not your fault. Not at all. So what did I do? Well, if the two cops felt that they could frame me for a wreck where I was rear-ended by their city trucks, then who else have they already framed? How many other older people have they taken advantage of? So I called the Georgia Post. I said, I want to put a policeman on report for under conduct. Oh, let me back up. I say, it's not about, it's about ethics. We don't do ethics. We're the law, I know the law, and that's all that matters. Well, that's how they exterminated Jews, was changing the law. So I called the Post, which is the Georgia Professional Officers Standards and Training, and filed a report verbatim of what they had said. And sent it in to them. I applied back up to Newport, Rhode Island, and come in on Thursday, they have Tuesday, going back up there. And I get a call from a sergeant, and he says, is this Dr. Creely? I said, yes, it is. He said, I understand you put Officer so-and-so on report. Yes, I did. Gotta tell you, the air is dry up here. And he said, you made this statement. That's incorrect, right? No, it's not. And he read off another statement. You want to change that, right? No, I don't. And he said, don't you want to withdraw this report? One of our finest officers. I said, no, I will not withdraw the report. And then he just lit into me. You are a sorry, no good. On it goes. And I'm sitting there listening. I said, this guy's lost it. And so he said, he is one of the best 350 traffic investigators. I said, well, obviously he's not in the top 1%. And the guy keeps going off on me. And I said, it appears you don't have the emotional intelligence to have a conversation here. Are you thinking I'm stupid? I said, no, you're not stupid. I said, this is a matter of ethics. And we don't do ethics. We do the law. I am the law, and I know the law. And then he says this. Let me tell you something, doctor. I looked you up. I have researched all the information. I know everything there is to know about you. Was that intimidation? Absolutely it was. So there have been other incidents where law enforcement have a power because they have access to the information to force what they want. And that has to be trust them to patrol your neighborhood, to keep you safe, patrol the campus. But when it comes to you personally, one-on-one, never, ever trust them. Because the one thing that I've learned, I've got attorneys in the family, and they're out for conviction. Why? Because it's money. And we get qualified immunity, where a police officer can commit a wrong and not be held accountable for it. I'm against asset forfeiture. That's if you're driving along like a lady who retired from work, not a wise idea, had $70,000 in her car. She had a tail light out going 95 down in southwest Georgia. Then they pulled her over for the light and they found the money. They decided she was a drug pusher. She was retiring and moving to Florida. They kept them because they can seize your assets if they claim you're doing fixed things. These are some things that are overreach of law. And so we have threatened not only externally from our adversaries, but we have people who are abusing power and using the law to do that. Any other questions, thoughts? Yes, sir.
There's a gap between ethics of discovery and technologies. So someone discovers the technology and somewhere along comes the ethics and we find out, oh, that's not a very good way of using that technology. How do we try and narrow that gap? How do we try and get that ethical question
Yeah.
into the discovery?
That's really important. January, February, I had 3 different companies, which were small startup companies that wanted me to do consulting for them on ethical AI. Because DOD now requires that companies prove that they have some type of ethical policy in developing. The government does not produce technology. They may do some experiments, but it is industry and business and startups that develops the technology. And the government isn't. So that is becoming more of an important thing that people realize the need for it. But you're right. People develop it, put it into action without ever thinking of the ethical implications of technology, generally speaking. In fact, it was a Human Genome Project that had the first funded ethical parallel program with Francis Crick. Is that who it was? Francis Crick. Francis Collins. That ran the mapping of the DNA. And it went for a few years with them parallel financing the ethics part. And then they said, oh, we don't need any ethics. So in any organization, business or whatever, what's the first thing you cut when you start cutting the budget? Ethics. But it's becoming more and more critical today because of the fast-moving pace of technology. And just the small nuances of change gives a whole different landscape of ethical challenges to deal with. Anything else anyone have? Yes, sir.
You mentioned how you think that human, I believe you said neural and computer, communicating computer thing. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, the guy quadriplegic, and the only way he can communicate is through his brain. And so Neuralink has developed that particular implant that is stuck into his brain, the electrodes that go into certain parts of the brain. I think it's good because they have also done similar type things with men and women who have experienced battle wounds that left them incapacitated at certain levels, and that they are able to use neurotechnology to have a better quality of life, rather than just being able to just lying there and not being able to communicate or move their arms. Sometimes, they can now have electrodes set up that they can move their arms with some prosthetics with them as well. So those are very positive things. Looking at human enhancement on the warfighting. Exoskeleton suits are important, particularly for the females being able to carry heavier equipment. So that way that they could be out there fighting the war the same as men. Yeah.
I'm going to draw
Okay.
to a close because I know many of my students are waiting for their bedtime. And so I don't want them to go home sleepy and so get hit the bed. If you are my students, if you haven't signed in, make sure you signed in. We'll have a room for a bit more. So if you want to stay and ask questions, I encourage you to do so. But let's take a speaker to a really
Thank you very much for your participation, and I hope this sparks an interest and passion in you about ethics of technology. Thank you.